Hello, everyone. It's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, I hope everybody is doing okay today. I have a very good guest with me. He's a friend of the show, and he's been on the show once before. This is Guy McPherson. He is an American scientist, professor emeritus of natural resources and ecology and evolutionary biology at the University of Arizona. Um, Guy, I think, is best known because essentially his argument is we're screwed, learn to live with it. And I got to be honest, when he was on the show once before, my feeling was kind of like, oh man, that sounds bad, but perhaps there's a difference of opinion on something like this. And then the UN report comes up with a hair on fire report, like just regular scientists, these guys, these iron-jawed, impartial, calm, collected. And in this case, you have 10, 15 years and you're screwed. Like that's the level of hair on fire. This isn't 2100. This is, you have 14 years. I think it was like 14 years to get your life in order. Otherwise, it's done. Donald Trump has a report. I think this is in August, a preliminary report. And in it, buried 500 pages within it, it says something to the effect of, by 2100, the world is going to hit 7 degrees. Now, the argument that's been used up to this point has only been 2, and this has gone all the way up to 7. This is a mind-blowing change in regards to the way we're talking about climate. Guy, I'm going to bring you in to talk about each one successively. The first one, please introduce yourself to the audience. I'm sorry.
Well, thanks for having me on the show again, Jamal. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. And I love the transition that you've made, that you've gone through from skepticism to holy crap, this is the real deal, because it is the real deal. And you also are willing to admit, as so few people I meet are, you're willing to admit this. This is almost impossible to take in, to actually take this in and live your daily life accordingly is essentially possible. At some level, you have to use cognitive dissonance. You have to block this out.
Yes.
You get paralyzed. Now, I've been living with it for 16 years. So you could argue that it's a little easier for me than it is for the average person. But still, I go through, I'm still flossing my teeth. I'm still doing those daily activities that we all do that qualify us as normal. And yet my hair's been on fire for a long time.
I don't think there's any other way to do it. I mean, how do you take in the end of human existence? And maybe not necessarily the end of human existence, but at the very least, a drastic and radical change to our affairs in one or two ways. Humanity gets to the point of saying, we got to do something about this, not messing around the edges. Like we need to have a Herculean approach commensurate with the World War II effort, where there is a radical focus on a redefinition of what it means to be a person and what it means to live on this particular planet. And not just that, to go further than that, to try to actually find solutions and put human intellect into a solution. That will require a radical transition by itself, or the secondary of prepare to die. Like both of those things require to a certain degree of radical. It's either reality is going to affect itself or inflict itself upon the human experience one way or the other. That's the way I look at it. But see, the difference is I looked at it kind of that way in the beginning. My biggest thing was, from a cultural standpoint, humanity is ill prepared to deal with the scenario. And, like I was talking to you before, this idea of the nice grandmother who loves her kid immensely and stops by McDonald's to get him a hamburger and drives him in the car to deliver that hamburger to that kid, not realizing that as she smiles with this kind of loving nature of watching your kid devour that piece of meat, that she is contributing to the end of the world through animal agriculture and through driving that car. Both of those things are considered completely normal. And both of those things, to some degree, contribute to the scenario that we have facing.
And all of that, she's being nice. She's
Tuesday
being
nights.
grandmotherly. This culture rewards her for that activity, as probably it should. What's wrong with grandmother being nice to her grandchild?
Yeah.
Nothing.
It's a cultural phenomena. Like, it's like, how do you change culture? And how do you do it not in 100 years, in like 10? Like, this is not one of those things, because even under the regular scientific model of the stuff, there's like 10 years built into whatever takes place. So even if you stop today on a dime, there is 10 years built into the process. And the UN scientists are saying you have like 14, 15 years to make this work.
Right.
Change, like a revolutionary change of culture in 14 or 15 years. And you look at that and say, we're screwed.
You
Like,
know,
we don't even have, I do a video on climate change, nobody watches. Seriously, no, seriously.
the
Nobody watches.
Secretary General of the United Nations yesterday said we have until 2020 to turn this thing around. We got 14 months, in other words, to turn this thing around. Well, we're not going to turn anything around in 14 months. The only thing of significance that might happen in the next 14 months is that this set of living arrangements itself might go away. There might be a collapse on the stock market or the bond market or whatever that causes the Great Depression version 2.0, but much greater. And then we won't be flying anything or driving anything or picking up hamburgers at Burger King or whatever. And then global dimming will get us. Right? I mean, the absence of global dimming will heat up the planet so much in a very short period of time that there's no way we adapt. So yes, it's dire, it's horrible, it's horrific, and you gotta live.
Just so we're clear, please explain to people what global dimming is. Some people might not have seen the last video that you were here on.
Right, at the same time, industrial activity produces greenhouse gases that we all know heat the planet by holding the long wave radiation close to the planet. It's called the greenhouse effect because, like a greenhouse, or like your car, which is greenhouse on wheels, the incoming sunlight is trapped. The long wave radiation can't get back out of the windows. It's the same here on planet Earth. It comes in, the greenhouse gases hold a certain amount of it in, prevent it from going back out into space. So at the same time industrial activity does that, produces those greenhouse gases, industrial activity also produces aerosols. The other phrase for global dimming is the aerosol masking effect. These aerosols go up into the atmosphere and serve as umbrellas or mirrors to prevent the sunlight from striking the earth to begin with. So we're simultaneously putting up a bunch of umbrellas and putting on blankets. And if we stop putting up the umbrellas, we close up all the umbrellas that are protecting planet Earth right now by cessation of industrial activity, or even by reducing industrial activity, the planet heats up catastrophically. It's the classic damned if you do, damned if you don't situation.
Wow. Wow. Let me ask you this, the UN report, could you explain that report to, let's say, the layperson? I mean, I was reading the reviews on that report, and it seemed like a hair on fire report, if I've ever seen a hair on fire report. I mean, even not necessarily taking it within your context, just even going to the degree that the UN was going, could you explain it from their perspective?
Right, so this is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, one of the most conservative scientific bodies on Earth and perhaps in the history of the planet. And they have concluded that we have until 2030, 11 years and a couple of months, to quote, solve the greenhouse effect. After that, we are beyond the point at which our actions are capable of making any difference to what goes on because we triggered so many self-reinforcing feedback loops. Well, bear in mind, this is the same United Nations supported group. This one is called the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. It's a United Nations group. It was the United Nations Advisory Group on Greenhouse Gases in 1990 that said we couldn't cross 1 degree Celsius above the 1750 baseline. And it was the head of the New York office of the United Nations Environment Program who in late June of 1989 said we had 10 years left. Somebody doesn't have the math quite figured out here. Either we had 10 years left in 1989, and that 10 years is long behind us, or we had 1 degree and we can't cross that, and we crossed that 1 degree a long time ago, or we still have 11 years and a couple of months left here in 2018, or according to the Secretary General of the United Nations from a couple of days ago, we have 14 months left. I see a lot of obfuscation out there. I think that there is either an attempt to confuse people, or the people who are presenting the information are confused themselves. So it's no surprise to me that the Trump administration comes out and says, look, it's a done deal. Previously, I said it was a Chinese hoax, but now I agree with the IPCC, with the United Nations. It's a done deal. We're screwed anyway, so pedal to the metal, baby. And that's been the response.
That's the other part that I want to get to, the Trump thing. So I did a report. The Hill reported that 500 pages within a preliminary report by Donald Trump, that there was the phrase, or there was the point where the Trump administration himself, who's this was a Chinese hoax, all of a sudden turns tail and says, by 2100, we're going to hit 7 degrees. That is a magnificent number. Like, I read that number and it jumps off the page. Like, what? Like, the argument up to this point has been 2 degrees. And he's talking about 7 degrees. This is the guy that doesn't believe in climate change, is talking about human-directed activity is going to cause 7 degrees. That's two things. What are the repercussions of that for human beings on this planet? And are you going to chest stomp, seeing as to some degree this is an approval, not just an approval, somewhat a validation of what you've been saying for the past 15 years?
No chest thumping, because nobody wanted to be more wrong than me. Believe me, I do not want the planet to warm up catastrophically in any period of time, whether it's 2100, whether it's 2030, whether it's 2025, whether it's next week. I don't benefit in any way by dying. And that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say it, but the 7 degree change, that's 7 degrees Fahrenheit, or approximately 3.5 or 4 degrees Celsius, that means human extinction, because already the climate is changing too rapidly for us and many other organisms to keep up. East Island, one of the small Hawaiian islands, disappeared last week. It went under the ocean. It won't be seen again. In the not too distant future, that's us. That's us as a species. We'll join the other 6 species in the genus Homo to go extinct. Not just because of sea level rise, obviously, but because we're losing habitat. We're losing habitat for our own species on planet Earth. We can't grow the food. We can't grow the animals that eat the food, that provide food for us. Even if we all go vegan, there's not enough plant life on the planet to produce everybody, to support everybody going, keep vegan. We're beyond the point of no return at this point. We've triggered so many self-reinforcing feedback loops, or so-called positive feedbacks, that we're done. It's just a matter of time. The United Nations is finally pointing out it's just a matter of time, even though they use the classic shifting baseline again to claim that the Industrial Revolution began in 1880 when it actually began in 1750. That's by common scientific acceptance. So we're done. We're done. We're done. Whether you want to dream that we're going to last for another however many years it is between now and 2100, whether you want to dream that that's possible, whether you want to dream it's just until 2030, whether you want to dream it's until its civilization, industrial civilization collapses, there's no turning back here. The Trump administration finally gets on board while adhering to the old 20 and 100 canard, which most climate scientists can't seem to escape talking about. But bottom line, the headline comes straight from Vanity Fair Earth is doomed. So the Trump administration response is go hog wild.
Yeah. So, but this is all because of Donald Trump, right? He pulled out the Paris Agreement. Obama and the European powers, who have this utopian idea that we're going to maintain the capitalistic system that brought us to the brink of extinction while simultaneously, like, incrementalists, like that. When I hear people say that, it's like, do you want to drive, like, Trump is going to hit it at 90 miles per hour, but the Democratic Party and the Western power is going to hit it at 70. You're dead either way. Like, the Paris Agreement is this kind of cutesy around the edges stuff, when what's called for is a radical, like to get across like a radical redefinition of what it means to be a human being in our relationship with this planet is understatement. And they're not even there yet.
Right. And, you know, the Obama administration, after he was reelected early in 2012, in his first term, Obama said in a speech that we are not going to change, we're not going to make any economic sacrifices just to deal with climate change.
That's amazing. Like, that's utterly, I think the reason why they have that sliding 2100 deadline is because it's so far in the future. Like, we don't have to do anything now. It's as if there's some disconnect between now versus then. And so we can focus on the then, missing the fact that what's taking place right now is
well,
is
and let's just
aggravating.
look at the latest report, which says 2030.
Yeah.
Or let's look at the Secretary General's interview from a couple of days ago when he said we have 14 months. Is that now enough for you?
That's now. That's now. And it's not like now in the sense of, okay, we need to, eat less, whatever. It is a dramatic change. I think that's the most terrifying thing to me. The reason why I accepted this a while ago was because I looked at it as, I don't see anything that would change the culture. Like, the culture is what the culture is. And I see nothing. Like, if there was an asteroid that was going to hit the planet and people could see the asteroid, and every day Chuck Todd would get on and says, oh my God, look at this asteroid. And people would say, oh my God, look at that asteroid. At the very least, everybody's attention will be focused on one very specific, bright goal of trying to solve that issue. And as dramatic and as deadly as that would be, they would at the very least be focused on it. You could put a human intellect and human will at the task of trying to solve the problem. I feel something similar with this. If people could focus their intellect and strength in regards to how do we solve this particular issue, maybe a chance, whatever the percentage of chance is. We're not even there. Like, we're not even at the point of recognizing that, oh my God, life on Earth is about to take a hit.
And that's what we're talking about. We're in the midst of the 6th mass extinction on planet Earth that's widely recognized in the scientific community. There's been refereed journal literature, conservative publications pointing out that we're in the midst of the 6th. And no response.
Yeah.
No significant response to that. You're right. If there was an asteroid, we'd get on the phone, we'd say, hey, Bruce Willis, you got to fix this. And I'm afraid that's been the problem all along, is that we want somebody else to fix it. And we, the individual we, the collective we, we're rewarded to do things the way we've always done them. We get rewards, financial and otherwise, for driving the car and picking up the hamburger and going into work and doing all those things that we've all done. It's all we've ever known our entire lives. And now you want to bring on a Manhattan Project? Whoa, wait a minute. Is that going to interfere with my lunch?
And how much is it going to cost? Which is an amazing statement, because that is what they're going to say. And it's like, you're talking about an unreal thing. Cash isn't real. And you're weighing that against human existence itself. Like, I've heard people say they can see the end of humanity before they see the end of capitalism. And hey, here you are. Here you are in real terms, like real world terms. All right. Is there anything that people see. I'm not in this mindset. I don't have this mindset that there's nothing you can do. Like, and I mean that just as an absolute, just across the board, whatever I face. And the reason I don't is because, pessimism is not a survival trait. And ultimately, people who are demoralized have no options, as opposed to, even if you're wrong, working towards something, even if you're wrong, if that makes sense. Like the reason why they used to tell people to, in case of a nuclear bomb, go under your desk. Now that's utter nonsense. You go under your wood desk or a nuclear blast. But it's because people function a little bit better when there is something that they think they can do to push it off. What about technologies to pull carbon out of the sky? What about like I guess, like for the food thing, for example, human beings in China has shown the ability to grow rice in salt water. Well, that was deemed impossible at first. All things are deemed impossible until they get to the point where they are possible. Is this one of those things? Is it possible to pull this stuff out of the sky?
We currently do not have the technology to make a dent in removing and sequestering, fixing for long-term carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. We don't have that technology. We have some promising technology on the horizon. We can extract carbon dioxide from the atmosphere in relatively small amounts by using a lot of energy to do that, by the way, which means burning carbon. So the net gain so far is relatively small. Can we scale that up over the course of the next few months or years? It would surprise me, but I'm a huge fan of taking action that might improve the situation, not
Yes,
just for us, but for every other species on the planet.
yes, yes.
So, so yes, I would love to believe there's something out there. I don't see the evidence for it yet. I I'm a huge fan of a miracle, and I don't even believe in miracles. So I think we should pursue those kinds of actions, while as individuals being prepared for the end of our days. And what I mean is in the way we live every day and how we treat each other every day. In my opinion, we need to act as if we don't have long, because I think we have a long way to go and a very short time to get there when it comes to things like carbon dioxide sequestration and delaying the freezing of the Arctic Ocean, which is bound to release all kinds of methane and
Mhm.
increase the heating of the planet because of the blue ocean instead of the white ice, and 10,000 other things that are problematic with the Arctic Ocean. But all that aside, are the things we as individuals can do? Yes, of course, absolutely. And the kinds of things that we learn to do in kindergarten and that most of us still aren't very good at.
Being kind to one another and treating each other like human beings.
Right,
What
absolutely.
about spraying stuff into the sky, like the geoengineering, in the sense of saying, all right, well, we put aerosols into the sky haphazardly. What about doing it intentionally with the idea of creating a solar effect of reverberating the sun back into the atmosphere, back into space?
Yeah, what's called solar radiation management is the best studied of all geoengineering techniques. And it's been very intensively studied by the scholarly community and has been found wanting so far. In fact, there are extensive reviews, syntheses in 2015 by the United States National Academy of Sciences and by a European body of similar stature that concluded that those approaches won't work and likely will make the situation worse. So again, I'm a huge fan of doing something. I have never suggested that we just say, screw it, we're all going to die. But I don't see the technology emerging. I don't see these synthetic approaches, the agglomeration, synthesis, of knowledge being put out there concluding, yeah, if we just do these 427 things starting today, we're
Yeah.
going to be better off. I don't see those.
And not to mention all of that, anything would require a recognition of a problem. And that doesn't, like, I am amazed. I got to be honest. I'm somewhat amazed by this. Like, I, you, you would think that when confronted with something like this, like scientists are the guys that explain our worlds. And this is not an esoteric topic. So this is not like what happens after death, where you can say, okay, that scientist is full of it. That guy doesn't know. That guy's, has a religious belief in his particular field that precludes him from getting into these more esoteric topics. No, this is nuts and bolts. Like, you know what I mean? This is, I go out, I make a measurement. We can see this greenhouse effect take place on other planets. Earth is not atypical of this.
This is James Hansen on the floor of the United States Congress in 1988 telling us that we cannot exceed somewhere between 320 and 350 parts per million. That's nuts and bolts. This is Carl Sagan and a very young Al Gore 5 years before that on the floor of Congress saying if we don't take action right now, we're going to end up where we're ending up. The consequences will be absolutely dire. So we've heard these warnings for 35 years.
And the aggravating part about this, neither party, like the Republican Party said it doesn't exist, and the Democratic Party is completely feckless to do anything. Like this, the dramatic approach, you would expect somebody to say, look, the world is coming to an end and we need to do something about it. And even if we fail in the pursuit of doing something about it, we need to do something about it. We need to take drastic action. And the drastic action is a radical transformation in regards to how we go about our affairs. Now, nobody's going to be on board for that. like, even if there's a recognition, people are going to be like, oh God, I don't like this. But the world is at stake. The problem is they can't see that the world is at stake. The only thing they can see is, hey, we're getting more forest fires, and hey, the hurricanes are bad, and hey, the Arctic Ocean is not, going. One of the other things, the amount of carbon in the atmosphere pushing down the nutritional density in our food, so our foods get less nutrients because essentially the foods are become junk foods, like plants and so forth. So year after year after year, they're like, hey, why is our food less nutritious? Well, the food is less nutritious. There's research showing that it was less nutritious because of the amount of carbon that was in the atmosphere pushing it down. Like these are ancillary effects.
Acidification of the ocean.
Yeah.
There's phytoplankton disappearing, but all of these are symptoms and you can't see the cancer.
Yes.
So when you have cancer, you are symptomatic, but you can't see the cancer. It takes a really close look, a really close inspection by talented, knowledgeable people to identify the cancer cells. We finally have a few people who are talented and knowledgeable who are telling us they see the cancer cells, and we're like, I don't see no stinking cancer. I'm just going to keep drinking and smoking and going on with my life.
All right, last question. So what do you suggest people do at this point? Like, assuming for the moment that you're right, and God knows I hope that you're completely wrong on this, and I suspect you hope that you're wrong on this too.
Absolutely. For many reasons. One, the timeline that I'm thinking about, I'm going to die too. I'm not even going to qualify for Social Security, which I think is a joke anyway. And so I don't want to die, and I certainly don't want every other species on the planet to die when humans die, and therefore the nuclear power facilities melt down catastrophically and strip away the atmosphere, and bam, we're all gone. No, I don't want any of that to happen. And perhaps most importantly for the average listener, there's no money in extinction. If you could spend one day getting the hate mail I get, you might have some idea of what I've been up against for the last 20 years. I don't want any of what I'm talking about to come true. I don't want to die individually. I don't want the quote world to end. I don't want our species to go extinct. What to do? The same thing I've been saying for years. Live beyond the limits of this incredibly restrictive culture, more fully than you can possibly imagine. Be you. All the other jobs are taken, man. Be you in a more full, complete manner than you can possibly imagine. Be real. Complete those relationships in your life. Treat every goodbye as if it's the last goodbye, because one of these times it will be. One of these times, live large, be bold, live like you're dying, because you
What
are.
you say, because you are, yeah. I mean, we're not going to be on this earth. I mean, one of the oddities is, we're not going to live forever anyway, to some degree. At some point, you're always going to have to confront that particular reality of it seems like I'm going to be here forever, but my mentality is going to be tested at some point. Okay, one more question. I'm sorry, I lied.
Well, and not only that, Jamaro, if I can interrupt, not only that, but every species goes extinct. There have been 6 previous species in the genus Homo, our species, Homo sapiens, 6 previous species in the genus Homo, all of them have gone extinct. And I'll bet there were a few members of each one of those species who thought, it won't happen to us. We're too clever for that.
Far too young and clever. There's a Star Trek episode. I always have these Star Trek allegories. On Star Trek, the human species got to the point, it advanced in technology and everything else, but it didn't become rational until the species was extinct, like was at risk. Like, and the planet acknowledged and recognized, oh my God, we're gonna kill ourselves. We need to change. We need to do something else. And I had this thing in the back of my head that maybe, like maybe we become that rational species that says, oh my God, the planet is at risk. We need to put all these petty grievances to the side. We need to treat each other like rational human beings. We need to get rid of poverty. We need to, I want my flying car. And we need to do this in a way that lives within our means, within the habitable space of our means. Fuck this capitalism stuff. We need to live within our means. And I hope that, even though I didn't necessarily know how that was going to take place, yeah, I mean, this is just a brutal wake up call, and like you say, you live like your life is ending, because to some degree your life is ending. What does it look like? So it's not a flash of glory. What? And this is the last question for real. What does this idea that at some point you are going to take an L, but what does it look like in real terms from the standpoint of an individual that's living their lives? A person, let's say, living in America, let's say living in Kansas. What does it look like to them to take an L through this type of scenario? Because I would imagine that hurricanes, floods, droughts, famines, refugee crisis. I would imagine that all of these things, this societal destabilization, just from the standpoint of the way we go about affairs, what does it look like? Oh, sound.
A lot in middle America, in Kansas, in a town or a small city, I suspect when civilization fails, and it will do so for most people without any warning at all, because of the inability to grow grains at scale, the lights will go out, they won't come back on, the water will stop coming through the taps. I suspect a lot of people will die from dehydration. Others who have managed to secure their water supply will die from starvation, because in the wake of the 6th mass extinction, where we're losing plant and animal life at an astonishingly rapid rate, we aren't going to have the bread. Every civilization needs bread and circuses to persist.
Yeah.
We're going to have circuses, I promise, until the bitter end.
Right.
But the bread is going to go away when we can no longer grow grains at scale. The wheat productivity this year is down from last year. That rarely happens, and it's a pretty significant decline compared to last year? At what point does it become too hot in the interior of large continents where all the grains are grown? When does it become too hot to grow a significant amount of grains at all? And so we don't have the bread and we don't have the corn that in America means no high fructose corn syrup, which is in almost every single food item. So when is there no food on the shelves? I don't know, but I don't think it's far off. So in the absence of water and food, obviously industrial activity is going to crater and it's going to get hotter and hotter as time goes by. Dehydration, starvation, I suspect people will resort to violence, as we're already seeing signs of. We're going to see refugees that are detested in the places where they're coming to.
Yeah.
And so that's going to create a lot of civil unrest, continuing civil unrest. And we're going to see the kinds of things we've been seeing every day. How many weeks can we look back and there hasn't been a large-scale shooting in the United States? It's every week now that somebody goes out there and loses their mind and starts shooting a bunch of people. That, Garrett Hardin warned about this in the 1960s when he was talking about too many people on too small a planet.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see the signs now. We're experiencing this enormous economic contraction. So people are losing their jobs. They're losing the ability to feed their children. They're losing the ability to feed themselves. They're staying in a flop house. People's lives are falling apart already. That's all going to be exacerbated into the future and accelerated.
Sorry.
So again, I return to my central message about how we live and trying to live fully with the time that we have, because now is what we have.
The sad part about this is we don't have, it's not a diminishing thing of resources. It's how we use it, if that makes sense. Like if society decided, like at this point, war, poverty, all those things are choices. We have technological acumen where we could live differently. Jeff Bezos has $150 billion. The $150 billion is not necessarily real within the grand scheme of things. It's only real within the capitalistic system. And that money that can be used to make sure people have clothing and food and housing and everything else is sitting in Jeff Bezos's bank account, not being used to the betterment of humanity, just being used for Jeff Bezos's, getting golden toilets and all this other nonsense. The aggravating part to that is we have the ability to change this world. I mean, we may say not necessarily enough time at this point, but the potential was there. Like not necessarily a utopian existence, but humanity could have lived within its means. So for example, like growing food. Humanity can grow food within, if we wanted to, if humanity put the muscle and mental energy behind it, in the warehouses, growing food in those warehouses, automate the processes where you can grow food with lack or less human labor on floors in these high-rise buildings, having plant material all the way down and giving that food or selling that food for dirt cheap. We don't do it. It's not even considered. Even the solar energy thing, like this idea of having a centralized solar power thing or solar or energy production purely so somebody can make a buck off of it, as opposed to saying, let's make sure that each house is an energy thing unto itself, where it's solar powered or something to that effect that doesn't necessarily require carbon in order to do it. We have the skill. We just don't do it. I think that's the most aggravating part of all of this. We consider ourselves rational human beings. And it's a rational human beings like the species that essentially ending our existence on this earth.
And I did all that. I voluntarily left a very privileged position as a tenured full professor at a major university, and I led the way. I walked away from this imperial set of living arrangements. I started growing enough food for me and several other people and living off grid, and I did that for about 10 years, and not 3 people followed.
Yeah.
Not 3. And I threw everything I had at it. I've been living without a paycheck for 9.5 years now. And I just don't see anybody, and this is not a poor me story. It's an example of how, yes, we could have done that if we had grown organic food at a small scale. And it would only take one out of every 5 or 10 people to do that for everybody.
Yeah.
Had we done that at the appropriate time, and we don't even know when that time was it 10 years ago? Was it 20 years ago? Was it 100 years ago? I don't know. But it's too late now because we've triggered these self-reinforcing feedback loops. And we didn't. There was no call for us to do that because that is not where the money is. And we are so afflicted with this monetary paradigm, and it's an affliction.
I call it a religious belief.
Yes, I couldn't agree more.
It's like, this idea that you're worshiping. My wife and I was at the store the other day. We were at a mall, and it's like you look around, it's like all of these people are worshiping at this altar. like literally, like going to get this or going to get that. And sometimes even me, like we have like all of these pair of Converse. I for the first time in my life, I bought a pair of non-name brand shoes. First time. And I realized from the time I was a kid, it was drilled into me just based on social pressures, Nike, Adidas, Filas, Reebok. Not necessarily that they're better than the non-name brand shoes, but it was drilled into you like, it gets you at such a young age that it has you for the rest of your life. And it's like, if I can't even break away from that, like that, it's hard. Like it took everything in me to buy that pair of shoes because I need it for the next place. But it was based on a need. We've fucked up. Like honestly, and that's such a massive understatement. like that's an understatement of a lifetime. I don't like to accept this thing of defeat, so I'm not.
No. And so that's why I say repeatedly, do what you can, do the right thing, take the right action, don't be attached to the outcome, because it is almost certainly going to go bad regardless. But that doesn't mean you should become an indecent person.
No.
That doesn't mean that you should do what the Trump administration has done, which is deny, and then, oh, too late, we're screwed, pedal to the metal.
Yeah. Agreed. Guy, I always appreciate you on the channel. I wish the message could be more upbeat, but I don't necessarily have this fascination with hope. Chris Hedges has gotten really gloomy. I don't know if you've heard Chris Hedges lately. And he said when people mention to him, like, God, man, you're kind of gloomy. And Chris Hedges is like, people have this fascination with joy. And even in situations where joy is not necessarily, mandated, that's not where we are. There's no magical door. Like you have to confront what you're confronting, and you confront that earnestly, even though you recognize that you can't even necessarily confront it because it's too big. You just exist and you go on with your life. And like you said, unattached to the outcome. I do this channel. I don't assume that I'm necessarily going to win in regards to my goals and my objectives. I do it in a way because I don't necessarily know anything else to do. You function it that way because that's the only way you can function.
Well, so, and Chris Hedges said something years ago. He says, I don't fight fascists because I think I'll win. I fight fascists because they're fascists.
Because they're fascists, yeah.
And because it's the right thing. And, this whole idea of happiness and joy, and that's what we need to seek, and blah, 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 is just drilled into us from the beginning, from, say, I don't know, the Declaration of Independence, the founding documents of this country, life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness.
Yeah.
That's one of the big three for us.
We sometimes, I always make these arguments that we have small incremental cultural things that push us forward, that for all intents and purposes, people are robots, and that they are taking in issues of their society where it is hard to make a determination where the environment stops and where they begin. And in making that argument, it's a demoralizing thing of accepting that free will doesn't necessarily exist in this process. That to some degree, people are just emulating the stuff that's in their environment. They're just soaking that stuff up and just replicating the stuff that's in their environment. There's no choice. There's no point where humanity says, okay, let's do something different. And in doing so, I say that to say they accept these issues of culture as normality. Like this particular culture is normal, missing the point that in the grand scheme of things, from a higher reality point, there is no norm. All of the normals are just relative to one another. It's not necessarily this way of life is the God-given way of life. The way of life that you live has to be within the context of your reality frame, your existence. Meaning, if you're going beyond the realm of your environment's ability to compensate for the way that you live, you're going to hit a wall. That's not, that's not an act of God. That's more so just this kind of reality thing in the way that we have a cause and effect reality, that there's no way around that. It's just the way it is. It's not right or wrong or good or bad. If you're living in a particular way, even if you consider that way to be normal, even if you consider that way to be just, the normality of it is just what you've been used to, not necessarily that it's right. And I think we've been living in that existence for so long, it's put people in a bubble where they think that this is just the way things are, missing the point that there's a larger reality at stake. I used to say there's no such thing as cash in this. Cash only exists within a capitalistic system, and the capitalistic system is only in people's heads. It's not a real thing. But Lord knows, worship at that altar as if it's a real thing. And it is a hard thing to break. And even when existence itself is at stake, it's still present, it's still there. And like you said, the Trump administration looked at this and said, well, might as well rip the chains off. It's done. Yeah,
it's
might as well.
absurd, but it's an absurd world.
Yeah. Dude, I so appreciate you coming on to the show again. Guy McPherson, I like you said, there's no chest stump in this, but I would imagine there's a certain degree of validation in both of those reports from the UN and from the Trump administration, in regards to the message that you've had all these years.
We all seek validation, obviously, for our work, especially when the work comes with no external rewards whatsoever. So, of course, I I feel validated. I feel like, oh, somebody finally has come, somebody who, quote, matters has come on board with the kinds of things I've been saying for a long time, coming close at least. But there's no joy in extinction.
No, there's not. No, that's an understatement. That should be on a t-shirt. There's no joy. Jesus Christ. Yes, that's going to be on a t-shirt. There is no joy in extinction.
So maybe there's money in extinction once we start.
Yeah, it's like a painful laugh.
Pleasure as always, sir. Let's do this again sometime.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. I appreciate this. Have a good one. Guy McPherson, everyone. Thanks. All right, guys. I'm going to end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support the content through Patreon. Thanks all.